My name is Tom Stroup, and on Find the Right Road today, I'm going to review my 2007 Chevrolet Corvette, so stick around. So I bought this 2007 Corvette in October of 2018 from D&M Motor Sports of Chicago, Illinois. It had 22,000 miles on it. It had the options and the color that I wanted. And so I paid $26,200 for it. The car is a C6 or 6th generation car. The 6th generation was manufactured by Chevrolet from 2005 until 2013. During the first 3 years, which is 05, 06, 07, it came with the LS2 V8, which is a 6-liter, 400 horsepower, 400 pound-feet of torque. The car is capable of 0 to 60 in about 4.8 seconds. It'll do the quarter mile in about 12.9 seconds at 110 miles an hour. And surprisingly enough, has a top speed in the neighborhood of 186 miles an hour. No, I have never gotten close to that. The predecessor to the 6th generation car was the C5 generation. And you can identify C5s pretty easily because they have the pop-up headlights. C5s were made from 1997 until 2004. And then, of course, the successor after the C6 generation was the 7th generation C7 car from 2014 to 2019. Now, if you're in the market for a C6, there were a lot of changes that were made during its lifespan. So, for example, the engine changed in this car beginning in 2008. They went from the LS2 to the LS3 engine, which gave you 30 more horsepower over the LS2. There were 2 transmission options. There's a 6-speed manual transmission, and then there's the optional automatic transmission. Now, in 2005 was the only year that automatic was a 4-speed automatic. I recommend you stay away from that first-year car, especially if you want the automatic. It's had some bugs and issues with it. And then starting in 2006 was the transmission that this vehicle has, which is a 6-speed automatic with the paddle shifters on the steering wheel. This vehicle is stock with the exception of the previous owner put an air raid cold air intake on the engine. But they also included a number of options which I really appreciate. So for example, this particular car is in the LeMans Blue color, which was a $300 option. They bought the interior upgrade. So normally your plastics around your center console with the stereo and the audio climate control system would normally be black plastics. They went with the body colored, so it is actually LeMans Blue down the center console, a little bit on each side of your gauge packages up front, as well as around where your button is to open the doors on each side. This vehicle is also equipped with the 3LT option package, which was one of the things I was looking for. And the 3LT bundled a number of items together. So you get the upgraded Bose stereo system. It has 7 speakers, 6-disc CD changer, not that I use it, with XM satellite radio. It does, though, give you the stereo controls on the steering wheel. It gives you a tilt steering wheel, an auto-dimming driver's side mirror, an auto-dimming rear view mirror with a built-in compass, as well as heated seats for both driver and passenger. And then the last thing in that 3LT is the heads-up display. And that is pretty cool. So the heads-up display on this vehicle has 3 different modes to it. You can set it on street mode, and in street mode, it will give you your tachometer, and you can change some of the other features if you want to see what your oil temperatures are or want to see where your fuel level is at. You can adjust that. It can give you some announcements as far as show you what radio station you change to, for example. If you have the optional navigation system, which I don't have, it will also show you your turn-by-turn instructions up in the heads-up display. But it also has track mode 1 and track mode 2. And essentially the difference between them is track mode 1 has a circular tachometer to it, and then it has a G meter on the bottom. So if you want to know how many G's you're pulling when you're going around a turn, you can pull it up into track mode 1 or track mode 2, and it will tell you what that G is. The track mode 2 is just a little different. It's more of a linear looking tachometer, but essentially shows you the same information. Now you also have some additional controls on the left side here of the steering wheel where you can adjust where its position is in your line of sight. You can adjust what your brightness level is of that heads-up display, as well as a few other things. In your gauge cluster, just below the tachometer and speedometer, is the driver information center. And the DIC is somewhat programmable. So other than showing you the usual things like what your tire pressures are at, if you want to see what your oil temperature's at, how many miles till empty, what your fuel economy level, all those sorts of things can be pulled up in the DIC. But it's also programmable. So for example, when you start the car, and I'll show this now, you can actually see it comes up and says Corvette by Chevrolet. And then when it's done with that, you can actually program what it says next. So I have programmed it to actually show my name. So it comes up and says Tom Stroup when I turn the car on. As with all base model Corvettes, it comes with the removable Targa top. And now I'm going to demonstrate how the Targa top is removed and stored in the back of the vehicle. So the first thing you're going to want to do is open the trunk. So you reach in here and you push your button and we open the trunk area. The next thing you do is climb in the vehicle, pull your sun visors down, pull your 2 levers on the front, push the button to release the lever in the back, and now I can climb out of the vehicle again. And what we do now is grab a hold of the Targa top and remove it like so. And front first, it goes in and has a area that it sits in. Drop it in, close your trunk, and you're ready to jump in your car and go for a spin with the top removed. It weighs a little over 24 pounds. It's a little cumbersome to get on and off. There is also an optional glass top that you can get that you can see through, which is kind of cool. But it's definitely a nice thing to have if you want to drive it in nice weather and you don't want to buy a convertible. It kind of gives you that feel of having a convertible. Now the vehicle has 4 different driving modes to it. So there is a button located here just beneath the transmission lever in the center console, and that button will give you 4 different settings. Now the standard setting, which I leave it at, is your active handling system is on and your traction control system is on. But you can also change it and change the active handling system that it kind of dumbs it down if you want to have a more sporty driving experience, still leaving the traction control on. Then there's a feature where you can just turn the active handling system off and yet keep the traction control on. And then the last one, which they make you hold the button down for 5 seconds, is to turn everything off. So if you're ultra confident in your driving ability on the racetrack and you don't want any of those technology assists, well, then more power to you, because I'm not that guy. Now, if you're thinking of tracking your car, there are a couple of other options which I don't have on this vehicle that you might want to look for. One is a magnetic selective ride control system, and that was an option that ran $2,000 when it was new. There's also a Z51 performance package for this car, and that was a $1,700 option. And so if you're interested in buying one that you want to run on the racetrack, I would suggest you look for those 2 options. Now, your visibility with this car is actually very good. So although the A-pillars are a little bit large, your visibility out your sides, your front is all very good. Your rearview mirror with that big glass back gives you nice visibility. My only complaint visibility-wise, and there's obviously nothing you can do about this, is the fact that you have this sloping hood that just kind of slopes away from you. And so it's really hard to judge where that parking block is that you're pulling up to. And so it's still, even though I've owned 5 Corvettes in the last 24 years, it's still sometimes I find myself parking 2 feet away from that parking block because I'm just afraid of scratching the front end. Now, the handling on this car, as you might expect, is excellent. It's low to the ground, it's less than 3,200 pounds, and it has a lot of rubber on the road. So this particular car has the 245/40 ZR 18-inch tires on the front, and then it has a 285/35 ZR 19-inch rims on the back. And so that's a lot of rubber you're putting down. So it handles really well. Now, the drawback to that, of course, you're driving a sports car. I live in Michigan, where sometimes we feel like we have potholes, like I'm driving on the surface of the moon. And so you're going to feel all those bumps and cracks and potholes as you're driving this vehicle, no matter which one of the settings you decide to run the car at. Now, as I mentioned, the automatic transmission does come with the paddle shifters. Now, I got to be honest, this is early generation paddle shifters. We are talking about a 2007 car that's now 13, almost 14 model years old. So there are the paddles on the back, and then they put the little pluses you see here, where my thumbs go, above the steering wheel. And it's kind of a hokey setup. I find even when I'm on the racetrack, I don't bother using it. So I just drop it down into the sport mode in the transmission and run it that way. Now, one of the drawbacks of this vehicle is the seats. So while it has lumbar support, it's frankly not very good. So I find when I've had this car on the racetrack that I find myself bracing against the door or using my knee over here to try and brace myself, because they're not all that comfortable. They're not great for long drives. And sure, they're power seats and there's some adjustment to it. And I've got a power lumbar support and that sort of thing. But it is one of the complaints that you hear a lot about these vehicles. The other complaint, of course, that everybody talks about is the cheap plastics material that they use with the dash and the gauges and your center console and the glove box. And it's just kind of cheap plastic material. Speaking of the glove box, by the way, you have a regular glove box over on the passenger side, but then you also have this center glove box. Now, the center glove box is really shallow, does not have a lot of depth to it. There is a power connection in there if you want to plug in a power adapter. Important to note that power adapter is always live, so don't plug something in there and forget about it, because it's likely to stay there charging and you could draw down your battery. The other problem, of course, is it tends to get very warm in there. So I don't recommend you put a chocolate bar in there, for example, and leave it overnight on a warm day, or if you're going to drive a long distance. One of my other complaints about this vehicle is the exhaust system, frankly, is pretty quiet. And it's pretty tame. So I'm running, for example, right now at 40 miles an hour. You can't hear it at all. If you want to hear the exhaust, you really got to get into it in order to hear that exhaust system wake up. So a lot of people find that that's one of the first modifications they do to their Corvette, is they buy a Corsa or Borla exhaust system so they can have more of an exhaust note to it. So I recently test drove a Jaguar F-Type, and they have one of the best exhaust systems in a stock sports car that you'll ever hear. And the contrast between driving that and driving this is dramatic. One of the real positives about daily driving a car like this is the amount of storage space that you get. So when you pop the rear hatch on this vehicle, you get 22 cubic feet of storage space. And that's a lot. I mean, I'm a golfer. I can fit 2 PGA-style golf bags back there without any problem. You want to use it as a grocery getter, you can certainly do that. So that is one of the really nice features. Now, if you get a convertible, you lose some of that storage space, obviously. But as far as the coupe versions of the car go, whether it's the base model or the high-performance Z06 model, you do get a lot of storage space back there. One of the other complaints that you hear a lot about this car is the Ingress and Egress. And so what I'm referring to is the really wide door sill that you have to basically climb over getting in and out of the car. This is actually the 5th Corvette that my wife and I have owned. Our first was a 1996 that was a C4 model that I drove as a $299 a month lease for a couple of years, and that kind of got us started on the Corvette train. Our next one was a 2003 that my wife bought brand new and used as a daily driver. We put 120,000 miles on that car, and I sold it to a little old lady in Lake Okeechobee, Florida. Our third one was a 2013 Corvette Grand Sport convertible, and while I loved that car, my wife, as it turned out, after 2 years of having a convertible, decided she just wasn't into having a convertible, and it had a couple of minor little warranty issues that we had to take care of, and so we ended up selling it back to the dealership. And then the fourth one I got before this one, which I didn't have very long, is I had a red 2000 convertible with a tan interior and a tan convertible top, which I made the mistake of taking out at Waterford Hills Racetrack, and I lost it coming over turn 4, which is Hilltop, and crashed it into a guardrail, and I'll show you a picture of that. One of these days I'll tell the story of how all that happened. And then after that experience, I was shopping for a Corvette again, and found this one, as I mentioned, in Chicago, Illinois. And it's the first car I've actually ever bought where I bought it sight unseen. So I did all the communication via email and phone conversations, and just bought the car, $26,200, paid them $200 to have them put it on a car carrier and haul it to me back in Michigan. One of the great benefits of this car is that V8 engine has a lot of low-end punch to it. So unlike when you get in a turbocharged car, so for example, my other daily driver is a 2015 BMW 435i. Great little car, 300 horsepower, but boy, you really got to get that turbo spooled up if you really want to get some torque and get moving. Whereas this car has lots of oomph to it. So I've had it on the racetrack a couple of times. I'll show a little bit of video of what that looks like. It is a lot of fun. It handles really well. As I mentioned, it has good visibility. It's just a really fun car, and it's a fun car for the money. So, for example, right now, this car is 13 years old. It's now got 40,000 miles on it, and Kelley Blue Book tells me the value of the car now is probably in the neighborhood of $22,000, $23,000. Well, under 20 grand, or I'm sorry, under 25 grand with low miles like that, you're really getting a lot of car for the money. The only thing I might suggest if you're in the market for a C6 is you probably want to look for the next model up, the 2008 or newer, so that you get the newer engine with the additional 30 horsepower. And that concludes my review of America's sports car, my 2007 Chevrolet Corvette. My name is Tom Stroup. This is Find the Right Road. Thanks for joining me today. If you enjoyed that video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to our channel. And we'll catch you next time.